U.S. attacks on civilian targets in Iran are increasing. World leaders want to know why.
We had months, if not years, to prepare all of these targets and to get it right.
The world has exclusive details of an attack on a sports complex the U.S. is investigating. I'm Carolyn Beeler. Also today, new security rules in Hong Kong.
The police can force you to turn on your phone, then there's nothing that can be kept secret.
And most of De Beers' diamonds come from Botswana. Now the country wants to own the company.
Botswana is saying we want to have a stake in the minerals that we mine.
Plus, we know the Underground Railroad from the U.S. south to the north. There was also one traveling to Mexico.
Mexico abolished slavery 30 years before the United States did. Why don't we know about this?
That's all ahead on The World. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. Thank you for joining us on this Friday. Conversations about the U.S. and Israeli war on Iran have centered on a lot of things: oil, the economy, geopolitics. But at its very core, war means that people die, often civilians. One incident that has not gotten much attention is the bombing of a sports facility in Iran where teenagers were killed, and that the world's Shirin Jafari has exclusively confirmed is being investigated by the U.S. military. Shirin, you started out digging into a different story when you came across this one. Can you tell me what happened?
Yes, you're right. I first started out my reporting trying to find more information about the attack on the school in the city of Minab in southern Iran. That attack happened on the first day of the war. According to reports, it left about 200 school children and their teachers dead. So far, the evidence suggests that the U.S. was responsible for the strike, and the U.S. military is conducting an investigation. It didn't give me any updates on where that investigation stands. But here's what happened. As I was researching that attack, I came across another one, somewhat similar to what happened in Minab. This one is in a small city called Lamerd near Shiraz, that's in the south of the country.
So I think a lot of our listeners, heard about this school attack. The one near Shiraz you're talking about, I think has gotten less coverage. This one was a sports facility that was hit, is that right?
Yes, it was a sports facility in which members of the teenage volleyball team were practicing. And what was hauntingly similar to the case of the Minab school was that there was, it seems, a military target nearby, but this sports hall was completely separate, just happened to be near that target. And so I reached out to the U.S. military to ask about this attack, and the Department of Defense confirmed to me that the U.S. is in fact investigating this incident as well as the Minab attack.
This incident, along with the school in Minab where all the school children were killed, all are disheartening reminder of how people on the ground are impacted by this war.
Absolutely. In every war, there is inevitably a number of civilian casualties. That's just sadly part of the reality of war. But the U.S. military technically has a set of rules and guidelines that it needs to follow prior to every strike to make sure that it minimizes civilian deaths and casualties. I should also add that there is an internet blackout imposed by the Iranian government, but information does trickle out, and I was able to get a picture of what happened at the sports hall from a local journalist.
روز اول حملات هوایی آمریکا و اسرائیل به ایران فقط یه خبر کوتاه اومد که
Negin Bagheri is a journalist in Iran. She interviewed eyewitnesses and family members of those who were killed in the attack in Lamerd, including the father of 11-year-old Elham. Elham had surprised everyone in the family and at school with her volleyball skills. She'd only been in the team for 2 years, but already she hit a mean serve.
پدر الهام در مورد دخترش اینطور میگفت که دختر من آرزوهای خیلی زیادی واسه والیبالیست شدن داشت و
Elham's father told Bagheri that his daughter had big dreams to become a professional volleyball player. Playing alongside Elham on the evening of February 28th was 10-year-old Helma.
من با پدر هلما نتونستم صحبت کنم به خاطر اینکه وقتی باش تماس گرفتم
I wasn't able to speak with Helma's father, says Bagheri, because he told me he was too distraught to speak. I can't cope with the death of my daughter, he said. But Bagheri says she spoke with Helma's cousin and her coach, who was at the sports hall and sustained serious injuries to the neck and head. The strike happened around 5 p.m. when it was getting dark outside. The first bomb hit what seems to be a military base, witnesses say, but the second one exploded mid-air. A verified video of the attack published by the BBC shows the moment of the explosion. The witnesses say that shrapnel from that bomb pierced through the roof of the sports complex.
برق سالن قطع میشه و هر کسی هر جایی که بوده سعی میکنه که
The power goes out and everyone scrambles to find their way out of the gym, Bagheri says. The children were scared and screaming. Amid the chaos, Helma runs up to her coach and complains about something burning in her chest.
بلوزش داد بالا و یه چیز خیلی کوچیکی، یه چیز شبیه به خار انگار توی بدنش رفته بود.
She lifts up her shirt, she says, and you could see something small had pierced through her body. A few minutes later, she faints and never wakes up. Iran's state media published videos and images of the aftermath of the strike. The roof of the sports hall is gone. The right side of the yellow brick building is black from the fire. An official describes the scene of the attack, breaking down in tears. There were at least 3 strikes on that day in Lamerd, 2 hit near the sports hall, another a residential area, according to witnesses and local officials. State media published the names of 21 victims. Among them was a young boy who was practicing soccer in a field.
خیلی از شهروندهایی که اون لحظه توی خونه‌شون نشسته بودن یا در حال کار کردن بودن.
Many of those who were killed, Bagheri says, were at home. One was a day laborer from Afghanistan, another a pedestrian who was heading to a nearby pharmacy. In response to my question about this attack, an official at the Department of Defense wrote in an email that, quote, it would be inappropriate to comment as this is under investigation. Wes J. Bryant served 20 years in the U.S. Air Force. In 2014, he was in charge of coordinating some of the first U.S. airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq.
Well, I was one of the leads that initiated the counter-ISIS campaign. I stood up the strike cell in Baghdad. And I can tell you, we could barely keep up with the amount of strikes that we were conducting then. And so, the fact that we've hit more targets in the first few days than in the first 6 months of that campaign, to me, is just horrifying.
Something that complicates matters, Bryant says, is that there are 2 militaries involved in this war, with 2 sets of rules and thresholds for civilian casualties. Bryant served as a senior advisor for a program at the Pentagon set up to minimize civilian casualties. That program was disbanded in 2021. Bryant says this kind of oversight could have helped minimize civilian casualties in attacks such as the one on the school in Minab.
We're the center still in place, and we're the personnel that were spread across the force, and we're our momentum still in place toward where we were going with the efforts we were doing. This strike would not have happened, and the Iran campaign would look a lot different.
The news of the Lamerd sports hall didn't get as much attention, Bagheri, the reporter in Iran, says, because it was overshadowed by the horrific school attack in Minab.
آمریکا توی یک روز با یک مدل موشک چه تعداد دانش آموزی رو
She says put together these 2 incidents show how in just one day and in the span of a few hours, the U.S. likely killed so many civilians. The U.S. hasn't officially taken responsibility for any of these attacks. For The World, I'm Shirin Jafari.
Oil is spilling into the Gulf of Mexico. Since the beginning of March, an estimated 80,000 barrels worth at least, and it stretches now across nearly 400 miles. It is washing up on the coast of multiple nature preserves in southern Mexico. The Mexican Navy says it's pinpointed the cause of the spill, a still unidentified ship, and 2 natural leaks, or seeps, on the seabed. But 2 experts we spoke to disagree with their assessment. One of them is geoscientist Oscar Garcia-Pineda. He says he does not believe what the government is saying about where the oil is coming from.
For that, certainly will require future investigation. I don't want to speculate, but is not from natural seeps. I mean, we have never seen a release of oil of this magnitude from the natural seeps that are close on the Bay of Campeche.
The Bay of Campeche, which is one of the locations where the Mexican Navy says the oil is seeping out. Is that right?
Yes, but it's been really well documented through many years. The range of, or the flux of oil that these natural seeps produce. And the amount that we see on this spill is way more than anything that we have ever seen. I mean, in orders of magnitude more than we have ever seen from releases from these natural seeps.
I will note here that we have reached out to the Mexican Navy for comment and more information, and we have not heard back from them in time for broadcast. Oscar, I want to ask you more about these natural seeps in the Gulf. I did not know they existed before hearing about this. Can you describe what they are, what they look like, what happens there?
So these are natural occurring phenomena where oil breaks through the seafloor and naturally seeps, but in a very small dosage. You see drop by drop of oil being exposed from the seafloor, goes through the water column, and it reaches the surface of the ocean. So this little dosage creates something that we call slicks, and these oil slicks, we can see them from satellites. So this is a phenomenon that was discovered about 50 years ago. And since then, we've been able to study where are they and how big are they? How much do they produce normally throughout the years? So it's been very well documented. We have maps of these natural seeps. So the magnitude of this spill has nothing to do with what they produce normally.
So the Mexican Navy has said they have not identified which ship this leak is coming from. Is it contained, or is this leak or spill continuing?
That I don't have information. However, it's actually possible to conduct research about where is it coming from. So chemical analysis can be done on the oil to do fingerprinting. And based on that, the oil can be sourced and determine where is it coming from exactly. Because these natural seeps has been studied for many years for the government, academic institutions, etc. So there is archives of fingerprinting information. It's like a DNA of the oil, right? So if you take a sample of this oil spill right now and you compare that against the DNA of these other natural seeps, then you can prove if it's coming from the same source or not.
But could you tell which boat it was coming from, or is that just investigation?
I cannot tell. I mean, I cannot tell where is it coming from for sure.
Yeah. That would be it. That's just an investigation that the Mexican Navy presumably is doing now.
Correct.
So there are people on the ground trying to clean this up. How does a government go about cleaning up a spill that covers such a wide area?
That's always a challenge, and the oil that reaches the shoreline, which is actually visible, is always just a portion of the contamination and the pollution. I mean, there is a lot of oil that it just gets submerged and it goes into the bottom of the ocean that is never going to be possible to clean. It's just the challenge of cleaning the shoreline. It exceeds the capacity of any response organization. So this is going to be a challenge. We've seen it on many spills here in America as well, and it takes years for environment to recover for sure.
You have not been to see this particular oil spill, but you have seen other oil spills.
Yes.
What does it look like when you're standing on the coast and, oil is coming in with the waves?
Well, it's the response. It takes days, weeks, months, because when you see the oil coming into the shore, then oil is deposited on the higher ground, and then you have tides, and then you have storms, and then so there is the oil that you see on the shoreline is not all the oil that's going to be there to clean. There is more oil to come later, and that oil is also coming back to the ocean and then showing up somewhere else. So it requires a lot of effort, not only on one place, but on a larger period of time,
Oscar Garcia Pineda is a geoscientist in Florida. He currently consults on the mapping and monitoring of oil spills. You're listening to The World. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. In Hong Kong, a new amendment to the national security law allows police to demand the password to a person's phone or computer if they want to search it. Rights groups and activists are sounding the alarm, saying this change further restricts free speech in Hong Kong. Victoria Hoy, an associate professor of political science at the University of Notre Dame, explained why.
This step is important because in 2019, when police approached people, either arrested them or just questioned them, the first thing they wanted to do was to force people unlock the phone to check everything, that the chat and all the exchanges. And then a lot of people, basically, they did, at the time people knew that you do not use face recognition or thumb recognition, but to make sure that it has to be opened only by your passcode. And now the police can force you to do this. Your phone is essentially your life. I mean, we hate to admit that, but it has everything about you. And then people have been using encrypted apps like WhatsApp, a Signal, Proton Mail, and all of these. But if the police can look at everything, can force you to turn on your phone, then there's nothing that can be kept secret.
So you're saying, yes, there are technically prerequisites that have to be met before police can make you open your phone, but in practice, they're going to apply that to whoever they want. That's your assessment?
Yes.
Okay. And what happens if you refuse to unlock your phone?
Yeah, so if you refuse, then you are subject to 1 year of imprisonment and 100,000 Hong Kong dollars of penalty. But I'm worried that because another clause is if you provide false information, you are subject to 3 years. People who have two phones, then what if they provide one and not the other one?
Right. So that's another of the changes to the national security law that was just passed in this package of amendments. There were others. What do the others allow?
Well, the others are essentially the national security law criminalizes sedition, collusion with foreign forces, and terrorism. And these are all very fake charges. And hundreds of people have been subject to that. And most notably, people who were just running in primary elections before the elections for the Legislative Council got cancelled. And those people have been subject to from about 5 years to 7 years in jail. So it's like people don't even know where the red line is.
People don't even know where the red line is. That uncertainty, I'm sure, weighs on people.
Yeah.
So these amendments are all under the national security law. The government has said in a statement that the lawful rights and interests of individuals and organizations are adequately protected. They are passing all of these regulations under the guise of national security. Is there any reason why they would be doing this now that would have reality in national security needs?
Yeah, so the National Security Law of 2020 also says that in early on that they continue to abide by the international civil and political rights and all of that. But then later on in another clause, they said this National Security Law overrides everything, including the basic law. So this essentially National Security Law takes over the basic law that promised Hong Kong one country, two systems and rule of law and all of that. And another part is that they thought that even the National Security Law was not harsh enough. So in 2024, they passed another Article 23 legislation that added the seditious clause. And so every time they keep saying that there's freedom of speech, there's freedom of the press, you can say whatever you like, but then everything is subject to national security law. Everything is subject to the new Article 23 additions, including seditious contents. So essentially, laws in Hong Kong have become the constitution of China. They put down in promises in black and white, but essentially those promises don't mean anything anymore.
Do you see these changes as basically catching up to the restrictiveness of mainland China, making Hong Kong just closer and closer to mainland China, or is it going beyond that in terms of restrictiveness, or is it not there yet? How would you compare the experience of living in Hong Kong versus mainland China right now?
It's essentially there are different ways to look at it. In some ways, a lot of people in Hong Kong say that we are still not China, thank God. So people can still fly in and out with a passport if you are not on the police watch list. But on the other hand, if we look at actually various human rights indicators, civil and political rights indicators, according to some indexes, Hong Kong is actually already worse than mainland China. And then when it comes to forcing you to unlock your phone, this is actually harsher than in China. And although it is not as harsh as in, if you live in Xinjiang, then they install a spy app on your phone.
That's the region in China where a lot of Uyghurs and oppressed minority live.
Right. So with this requirement that people have to provide passcode to the phone, this is worse than in China.
I understand you're from Hong Kong.
Yes.
What are you hearing from people there right now?
So here is another thing is that it is very difficult to hear from people. And also that I've been using encrypted messages app to talk to people, to stay in touch with people. But then now, if anyone can check your phone, I don't think that people inside Hong Kong are still willing to talk to me. And also because I'm a critic of China, of the policy, I've been talking about Hong Kong. And then I also co-founded the Hong Kong Democracy Council in DC, although I stepped down from it, but I'm sure that I'm on the watch list. So essentially, this new regulation is going to really cut off Hong Kong from the rest of the world. So, and at the same time, to make sure that it is very dangerous for anyone inside to talk to people in exile.
So have you noticed a drop-off in communication from people you know in Hong Kong?
Not quite, but at the same time, I should note that even after the national security law, a lot of people, and my friends, if they were not in jail, then of course I couldn't talk to them. But if they were kind of like they thought that they were under house arrest, they already cut off ties with me.
That's tough.
It is. Essentially, they want to make sure what happens in Hong Kong cannot really travel overseas. And for overseas advocates to be effective, they need to know what is going on in Hong Kong. And they are severing those ties.
You mentioned people carrying burner phones. Are there other steps that you know of that people are taking to protect themselves?
Again, it's up to now, most people have been using Proton Mail, WhatsApp, Signal. But these all require that you have those apps on your laptop, on your computer, on your phone, on your iPad, and those are not safe. And then at the same time, I've also heard that mails going in and out are also checked, and packages going in and out are checked. I think that it's really hard to maintain any protected communications.
You sound a little shaken by this one. Is that accurate?
It's definitely, I would say that the advocates, basically Hong Kongers overseas in exile, after seeing that regulation, the new announcement on Monday, had been really, really alarmed.
Tell me more.
My own research is also to look at transnational repression, but this is actually beyond transnational repression. This is cutting off ties. What happens when regimes put people in prison is to lock them up, create a fortress. And with political prisoners in Hong Kong, they've already been limiting visits by religious leaders or justices of the peace and all that. And then they're kind of like creating a fortress around Hong Kong like that, so that the access in and out is severely limited. And it's not just physical entry and exit, but also communications, digital communications.
Victoria Hoy is an associate professor of political science at the University of Notre Dame. This is The World. This is The World. I'm Carolyn Beeler. The news that transgender women will be officially banned from competing in women's sports in the Olympics is still fresh. That policy from the International Olympic Committee was announced yesterday. But sex testing in sports is not new. The genetic test being used by the IOC was also mandated by World Athletics for track and field events about a year ago. The president of World Athletics, Sebastian Coe, explained the controversial move this way at a press conference.
We will doggedly protect the female category, and we'll do whatever is necessary to do it.
This fall, reporter Bianca Hillier looked into the history of sex testing just ahead of the first World Athletics Championship to require this test.
Protecting the female category has become one of the most discussed topics in elite sport. In part, supporters say they want to protect fairness and integrity in the women's category, which they see as under threat from athletes with unfair biological advantages. That often refers to transgender athletes or those with differences of sexual development. But critics point out that biological advantages are common in sports.
All sport is built on biological variation. Height, lung capacity, fast twitch muscle fibers, VO2 max, limb length.
Katrina Karkazis is a cultural anthropologist and bioethicist who specializes in sex and gender studies. She says while some biological advantages are celebrated, like the wingspan on Michael Phelps or Yao Ming's height, others, like hormone levels, are strictly governed.
So there's no clear boundary about what counts as unfair advantage, what would be permissible or impermissible. And so this, I think, exposes how subjective and political these kinds of regulations are.
Poyoshni Mitra agrees that these new tests are part of a political game. She's been advocating for athletes impacted by sex testing for nearly 2 decades.
This is a very problematic set of regulations that they have brought in.
Instead of protecting athletes, she says the new tests open them up for public scrutiny. If World Athletics president Sebastian Coe really wants to protect women in sports, Mitra suggests tackling more pressing issues.
Like equal pay, ensuring that there is no sexual abuse or harassment in sport.
The tests that are now mandatory for athletes in the female category are looking for something called the SRY gene. If a woman has the gene, she'll be disqualified. World Athletics says it's a reliable proxy for determining biological sex. Dr. Eric Verlaine is a geneticist who specializes in sexual development. He says the SRY gene is on the Y chromosome, so
when this gene is present, most of the time, the individual will become male.
Most of the time, but not always. Dr. Verlaine says the World Athletics test ignores the exceptions.
There are a small number of cases in which the SRY gene will carry a mutation and, in fact, will be born female.
So a woman could have the gene and be disqualified. Aside from what does or does not define sex, Dr. Verlaine has additional issues with the new regulations. He says genetic testing should be voluntary, but in this case,
the athletes don't have a real choice of saying yes or no to this test, because if they say no, the immediate consequence is they cannot compete.
Critics have also raised privacy concerns over how data will be handled. World Athletics did not reply to repeated interview requests for this story. But at a press conference this week, the organization's president, Sebastian Coe, said no athletes have come forward with privacy concerns.
Our medical delegate is the only one that will see the test. If there is anything to be followed up on, they will follow it up directly with the athlete. And as and when the information that we glean is deemed useful and absorbed, it is then destroyed.
He's also made the point that all this test takes is a cheek swab or blood test. The controversy may feel particular to this moment, but the tests and the controversy surrounding them go back a long time. It's really just the latest in a long history of sex testing in elite women's sport. The concept first showed up in the 1930s. At the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, an 18-year-old U.S. runner named Helen Stevens stunned everyone with her speed on the track.
Der Weg ist frei für Amerika. Helen Stevens stürmt als erste durchs Ziel.
She won the 4x100-meter relay and the 100-meter dash. That was a big surprise. A Polish runner named Stella Walsh was largely expected to grab gold. So when Walsh got second, Polish media was furious and accused first-place Stevens of being a man, says David Walachinsky, an Olympic historian.
And so they demanded that the organizing committee examine Helen Stevens. So they gave her a visual exam. She was a woman. And that was the end of that.
Visual exams for any athlete suspected to not be a woman became common policy. Then, in the 1960s, the policy expanded to all women. Mandatory visual inspections were known as nude parades. Athletes at the time called them peek and poke tests. The practice was widely criticized and abolished after a couple of years. So sports governing bodies moved on to other testing methods that they thought would be less invasive. First, chromosome tests, and women had to carry around little cards verifying they were women. Then, the SRY gene was discovered in 1990. Yes, it's the same one tested for in today's regulations. Geneticist Dr. Eric Verlaine again.
SRY testing has been used before from 1992 all the way to 1999 when it was discontinued by the International Olympic Committee.
He says it was discontinued then because there wasn't evidence that people with the gene had an athletic advantage.
It was recognized by many genetics experts that SRY by itself was not enough of a good marker for athletic abilities.
Olympic officials agreed to suspend sex testing for the 2000 Games in Sydney. The next marker widely used in elite sport was testosterone levels. To Katrina Karkazis, all of these changes prove a point.
There's no single biological marker that can capture the complexity of sex. It's one of the reasons why sports governing bodies over time have cycled through these various markers, because they've always had to confront the limitations with any one specific marker that they've chosen.
Karkazis says she doesn't blame athletes who wonder if biological markers like chromosomes, hormones, or genitalia do provide an unfair advantage in sports, because she says that's a really potent discourse in society, and most schools simply don't teach about the complexity of sex. Karkazis admits that education alone may not solve the problem.
But not to have done it at all, I think, has really allowed a lot of misconceptions to continue and to sort of be the core of these debates.
I reached out to more than a dozen women competing to hear what they think about the tests. Nobody granted an interview. World Athletics President Sebastian Coe said over 95% of women completed the test.
With the remainder of tests, the French team, the Norwegian team, and some athletes based in France being done here in Tokyo ahead of competition.
The reason those athletes didn't take the test back home? They're illegal under national bioethics laws.
Some nations will have national laws in place, but actually on this occasion where they have, we've actually managed to work our way around those in a sensible and a constructive way.
For supporters, that workaround is proof the policy can be implemented worldwide. For critics, it's more evidence that the tests are illegitimate. For The World, I'm Bianca Hillier.
Bianca reported that story at the time of the World Athletics Championship in Tokyo. Now that same test is being required of athletes for the next Olympics. If you missed that piece of news on yesterday's show, you can still hear it at theworld.org. Let's turn now to Botswana in southern Africa, which dominates the market for a particular precious stone.
The diamond engagement ring. How else could 2 months' salary last forever? A diamond is forever. De Beers.
Even if you don't know the diamond company De Beers, you probably do recognize that tagline. It has been around for generations, outlasting, it seems, some of the shine of the company's product. Consumer demand for real diamonds has dipped, and now Botswana, where over 70% of De Beers diamonds are mined, wants a stake in the company. Joel Kanopo is the co-founder of the Inc. Center for Investigative Journalism and spoke with Marco Werman from Botswana's capital, Gaborone.
Joel, what is the significance of De Beers for Botswana?
De Beers is the lifeblood of Botswana economy, basically. De Beers has been since maybe 1967, 68, been working in partnership with Botswana government to mine and deliver diamonds and help the economy develop the way it has to be one of the most developed economies in sub-Saharan Africa in terms of GDP growth. Over the past years, especially in the 90s, So De Beers is very central to about education or health and social development of the people of Botswana.
So now Botswana is among the countries that want to buy a larger share of De Beers. What is the reason behind that?
Botswana is saying both we want to have a stake or control in the minerals that we mine. We cannot just mine and sell to a third party and not have control and sort of a stake in how the value chain of the diamond goes. So at least we want to be part of that. So they have been interested in trying to gain control of De Beers.
Well, you can imagine with its dominance in diamond volume, Botswana is in a good position, but it's also been dealing with a global slump in the diamond market. Remind us why that's happening right now.
The biggest challenge faced by Botswana is because of the declining sale of diamonds, partly due to the advent of synthetic diamonds. Botswana is facing significant challenges because it has been too dependent on diamond. And that has been a problem because Botswana has not been able to fully diversify its economy away from minerals, especially diamond. So any decline in revenue from diamond is a significant decline in the ability to access healthcare and education and other services. So what happened is that they want to partner with Angola, which is a strong competitor. Angola has now actually almost at par with Botswana in terms of production of quality diamonds. And there are those who are saying, maybe Angola is not the best partner because you are competing and you are at par. Maybe you should have looked for someone who you can maybe beat in terms of the size, like South Africa or Namibia or even Tanzania. But Botswana decided to go with Angola from what we hear.
Along with those problems, Joel, De Beers' value has fallen in recent years from almost $13 billion to about $2.3 billion. Why does Botswana want this company?
It's very confusing as to why it wants to stick to a company whose value is declining over the years. But partly it is largely because if you listen to President Duma Boko, he is saying they have got plans because now they will be the biggest producers for De Beers. That they say they don't want to say it in public, but they've got plans to really get back and improve the value of De Beers. And for that reason, they'll be somehow find a formula to push back at synthetics and make natural diamonds more attractive to markets. And everybody's looking forward to that because without diamonds, natural diamonds in Botswana, there's a big challenge in terms of revenue.
Even the International Monetary Fund, though, has advised Botswana against this investment, right?
IMF has actually advised against trying to buy whole of De Beers because first, Botswana doesn't have sufficient resources to put on a big stake like De Beers. IMF thought Botswana would maybe play a role, but not as significant as controlling De Beers, especially where there was a talk of 85% shareholding. It is a lot for a small economy like Botswana. It's a lot for an economy that wants to diversify away from diamonds. In my view, it's risky because you are putting all your eggs in one basket, but President Boko is insisting that they have a plan.
We know diamonds don't hold their value forever. Resale of diamonds is typically anywhere from 20 to 60% of their original price, which is actually worse than resale of a new car. Mm-hmm. To your point, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Has Botswana sought to diversify its economy at all?
Botswana has struggled to diversify its economy away from mining generally, but away from diamond. There was a time diamond revenue contributed 85% to Botswana export revenue. So that's a lot. Diversification has eluded Botswana, partly because it's landlocked. It shares borders with a strong economy in the form of South Africa until Botswana finds something that is homegrown, that is domestic, and it is kind of unique, but also of great value. It's going to be a challenge, really.
Has a drop in De Beers valuation and diamond value generally, has it impacted life on the ground in Botswana, and what does that look like?
It has been very significant. I'll tell you, the health sector and the education sector, particularly the health sector, because it's a matter of life and death. There has been impacted. Unavailability of sometimes very basic medication, like for rabies.
Rabies, sure.
This is a disease that shouldn't be killing people in 2026.
Yeah, no, it should not.
But 3 weeks ago, it killed the 5-year-old in the northern part of Botswana. There was no rabies vaccine. For me, that is very sad, and it's a serious setback. The basic things are a bit of a struggle now. And Botswana has been a really stable economy, as you know. That stability is really challenged just as a result of decline in revenue in diamonds, especially declining even in the market cap for DBS.
Joel, a very basic question. Does Botswana even have the capital to buy a sizable share of De Beers?
Remember, DBS is not a mining company, it's a marketing company. And marketing diamonds is also very expensive, right?
Good point.
Because you need to market this product when it's not doing well to compete against synthetic. When you don't have money, you need to put more money on marketing. So it's tricky as to where Botswana will get the funds to really actually run DBS, because once you buy it, you need to run it. It's going to be very expensive. The other question would be, where does Botswana get the money to buy DBS? Whether it's going to be $2 billion or $4 billion. Angola has money. You know, Angola is a big economy. It's one of the biggest economy in Southern Africa. So there's no question. They've got money. They've got oil. Botswana doesn't. And when you ask President Boko, he tells you they spoke to the Oman Investment Fund. Like, it's a sovereign wealth fund in Oman, in the Middle East. They want to use their funds to acquire DBS. That on its own also raises eyebrows. It's a very interesting question. How you will pay back Oman, because there's nothing for free here.
Joel Kanopo, co-founder of the Inc. Center for Investigative Journalism, speaking with Marco Werman about Botswana's hope to buy part of the diamond company De Beers. Before we sign off for the week, one small delight, a swing set, right on the border between the Dutch town of Barel-Nassau and the Belgian enclave of Barel-Hertog. Residents cross the border constantly in daily life, but the swing set, it takes it to another level. Every time you kick your legs, you swing into another country. Crossing borders, not always complicated. The World is produced by GBH and PRX, broadcasting weekdays from the Nan and Bill Harris studio in Boston. We are online. You can find all our stories and conversations at theworld.org 24/7. We also have original reporting on our YouTube channel. Look for The World News Radio. I'm Carolyn Beeler. Have a great weekend. We'll be back in your ears on Monday.
The World is supported by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. By the Lumina Foundation, committed to a fair, universal system for learning beyond high school that offers every American the chance for a better life. luminafoundation.org. By the PRX Ambassador Council, whose members include Judy Piggott, the Gruber Family Foundation, the Schmidt Family Foundation, and Gavin Salmonese, LLC. The World's theme music is composed by Ned Porter. The World is a co-production of GBH Boston and PRX.